Friar Lawrence is the villain, right? The Catholic friar is the vicious character who's manipulating people for his own devious ends. It's a very anti-Catholic poem. But what Shakespeare does, he baptizes the play, and Friar Lawrence becomes the only person who's speaking reason.
In a nutshell, about literature with Joseph Pearce.
Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Franczak and this is part 39 of In a Nutshell about literature with Joseph Pearce. We are almost nearing the end of our conversation about Romeo and Juliet. After dwelling on the importance of the famous balcony scene, we are now focusing on Friar Lawrence. Why did he fail when he wanted to help the two lovers? And I think the last thing that I would like to choose to talk about is a person, a character in this play who is actually essential for the whole plot, Friar Lawrence. He seems to be the only voice of reason in the play. He also points out Romeo's weaknesses, scolding his feminine-like behavior. Like, for example, there are these words which you also pointed out. These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as thy kiss consume. And maybe one more. Therefore love moderately, long love doth so. Too swift arrives as tardy as too slow. Right, and I think it is very important to understand the whole plot and the whole idea of the play, what Friar Lawrence says. So he is the only voice of reason, but why does he fail?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And what we have to do, first of all, is take things back a little bit, because Shakespeare, in many of his plays, Shakespeare very rarely invents a plot. He takes a pre-existing plot, pre-existing work, and then what's very interesting is what he does with it, because that indicates to us, illustrates to us, reveals to us his motive, right? If you have a source, in this case a poem, often it's a play, but in this case a poem, a previous poem by Arthur Brooks. What does Shakespeare do with that? In other words, what inspires him to want to do his own version? You know, how is it different? And in Arthur Brooks' poem, that Friar Lawrence is the villain, right? The Catholic friar is the vicious character who's manipulating people for his own devious ends. It's a very anti-Catholic poem. But what Shakespeare does, he baptizes the play, and Friar Lawrence becomes the only person who's speaking reason. But, you know, because Shakespeare's paralleling the original plot, Friar Lawrence, you know, is a weak character. So what we have is someone who understands the truth, because he's a Catholic, right? He's a Franciscan. He understands the truth. He enunciates the truth, but he doesn't always practice what he preaches. So in other words, in a naive belief that this marriage might cause peace between the families, he accedes to it. But even then, you know, with great reluctance, because he realizes, well, you two are going to basically fornicate. You're not going to be restrained anyway, so we may as well make it legitimate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not bona fide. That's not what the church teaches, right? You can't. can't force the church into marrying you because you're going to fornicate if they don't. I mean, so he starts to go astray and awry. And another reason is because he's quite frankly a bit of a coward. Right, so he lacks courage. This is particularly the case in the climactic moments in the two, where if he had remained and not, we have to leave, and and Juliet refuses to leave, and so he leaves her, he deserts her, and then of course the consequence of that is that she is left alone to despair and to take her own life. But again, what do we believe as Christians? Well, a good confession by a prodigal son leads to the forgiveness of the father, right? So one of the greatest speeches in the play is Friar Lawrence's confession of what's happened, which we know, we've seen it all, completely honest. He's not being devious. He's not trying to get himself off the hook. He tells the complete truth. It's a good and honest confession, right? And at the end of that, he says, I am willing to suffer whatever punishment, even death, for my role in what's happened. And then the verdict of the man with authority, right, the prince, is, we still have known thee as a holy man. So if you like, the final verdict of the play, the final verdict of Shakespeare, the final verdict of the prince, is that yes, this man's made mistakes, as we all do. Yes, he's weak, but he's a good and holy man who's motivated by the right things, but has his weaknesses.
All right, but cannot we also interpret that character and his doings this way, that the end doesn't justify means that we use to achieve it, because he also uses some, let's say, tricks, right, to cheat, both families, feuding families.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, it's always illicit morally to use evil means to a good end. Again, I think that's part of his confession at the end. And he does actually say, when the message he sends to Romea doesn't make it because of the plague and his colleague can't get there in time, he says that basically a power beyond us is taking charge. In other words, that God, providentially, is not going to allow this to work. Right? This is not the correct way of doing things. Using illicit or evil means to a good end is itself illicit and evil, and Providence itself outmaneuvers Friar Lawrence, and so his designs do not come to be because Providence itself stops them from happening, and he knows that. He says that, that basically power. I can't remember the exact word offhand, but power beyond our designs is thwarting us. So that absolutely, and I think that's part of the weakness of the plot. The weakness of Friar Lawrence.
Yeah,
but except he confesses it, and he's found to be a holy man. And it's our point. We do have to understand, that all of us are miserable sinners. So even the saints are sinners. So the point is that we should not point the finger and look at the splinter in Friar Lawrence's eye and ignore the plank that's in our own. The point is quite clearly the final judgment through his good confession is he's absolved of his sins and shown to be a holy man.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't seen the previous episodes yet, please check the In a Nutshell About Literature playlist. You can watch them individually or as 5 long compilation videos. And please remember, you can support the development of this channel in several ways. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet. Like this video and leave a comment. Share the video by copying the link and posting it on our social media. Support us financially by buying me a virtual cup of coffee or making a donation. Please check the options below the video where you'll find links to 2 services, Buy Coffee 2 and Zrzutka. You can also support this channel by doing the shopping in my online store. Thank you once again, and see you in the next episodes of In a Nutshell about Literature with Joseph Pearce. God bless you.